Hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk Ray Bradbury. If you are new to the channel, please take a moment to subscribe. All right, so here on Let's Talk Ray Bradbury, going all the way back to 2018, I've been attempting to read and review each of the roughly 600 short stories written by the great Ray Bradbury. Today we are up to a story called The Transformation, which was written in 1948 and 1949, but I don't think it was published until this book, The Cat's Pajamas Stories, in 2004. Up front, just a warning, this story is a difficult one, dealing with very serious issues, racism, the death of a child, rape, suicide, some very nasty subjects going on in Bradbury's mind in the 40s. But I'm not going to speak about it very explicitly, so don't have to worry about that. But it is, if these are issues that's going to cause you strife this morning, maybe you want to save it for later. YouTube's a little bit weird. A while back, they evaluated one of my old videos. It was a Ray Bradbury story, very tame, but it did deal with suicide, and somehow the algorithm sort of tore that out of there and found it and insisted on making it restricted for some reason. But here we go. The way that these reviews work is I do a brief synopsis of the story and then wrap up with my sort of thoughts and things about what it all means. So, a southern white man named Steve Nolan is abducted from his house one evening by four white men. They pull him out of his apartment and put him in a car, and they begin to drive. During the drive, they recall the story of a black woman named Lavinia Walters, who was raped repeatedly by Nolan over the past few years. That day, we learn Lavinia marched into town, walked into all the white-only establishments, and kept saying, "This baby I'm carrying belongs to Steve Nolan. This is Steve Nolan's child." Eventually, after going on this walk down the street, she finds a barrel and she drowns the baby. Eventually, we learn that that night, Lavinia's body had been found hanging from a tree. It's unclear whether it was suicide or a lynching, and that is left rather ambiguously. So, Steve Nolan, this bad man, eventually recognizes his four captors as carnival workers, and they are taking him to the carnival in the middle of the night to the tattoo parlor tent, and they're going to tattoo his body from head to toe with black. They suggest to him a future in which he may lose everything because of his presumed race, and people not wanting to, even if they know he's a white man underneath, they're not one to risk the wrath of people like the Klan and bad government for renting to a black person. And as he's looking up at the ceiling, being tattooed from head to toe, he imagines the next day breaking all the mirrors in his house and wearing white gloves so he doesn't have to acknowledge the way he looks. So, as I said, it's a tough read despite not being all that graphic. This is Bradbury after all. He seldom goes that far deep, but he doesn't need to make you feel the challenging emotions, and I think he does that well here. It is generally unsettling if you're a person who hates racism, as I do. This story never would have flown in the 1940s when it was written, and as far as I know, it was not published until 2003, probably for those reasons. He probably tucked it away in his files for later use because of that. I guess the story, when it comes down to it, amounts to the prospect of a reverse lynching. Nolan is absolutely a bad person, but the four men in the story, their behavior is a little bit too ambiguous for the good of the story, if I say so. Nolan at one point accuses them of being liberal communists, and they insist that, no, we're all Republicans, white Southern Republican men. But parties have somewhat switched over the decades, but even so, it's a little bit more ambiguous than it needs to be. It's not entirely clear, or it could be easily misinterpreted that they are doing this to him because he had sex with a black woman. But I don't think that. I think that Bradbury's intent, knowing his work, his other stories that are very much anti-racist, the idea is that they're flipping the script on him, making him live to endure the same indignations and prejudice and mistreatment that black residents of the South are doing. And these are carnival workers who have found a a clever way to enact revenge for Lavinia's death and for the death of the child and for her rape. So that's what I interpreted it as being a very unique way of enacting revenge for these horrible, horrible acts. Because, I mean, what better way to sort of teach somebody? They could essentially kill him for his crimes, but there's no lesson learned from that. So I interpret it as Bradbury showing a unique form of revenge and teaching by these men against Steve Nolan. Overall, it is a better concept, I think, than it is in execution. I think a lot of people wouldn't have the balls to write this story, even today. Bradbury, for whatever reason, he wrote it. He was feeling these feelings in the 40s, and it did eventually get released as recently as 2003. But I still think it's, in its way, an important story. It reminds me something like you might see in, like, I don't know, an anthology series of some sort, like an Outer Limits or a Twilight Zone or a American Horror Story or something intended to have a strong moral lesson in it, but is told in a sort of perverse way where it really flips the script and makes you think about things and forces people, even people who may feel prejudice, to look at what they're actually doing, what they're actually thinking with their kind of behavior. And I think that's a kind of story that unfortunately remains very, very important today in our strange, strange world where increasingly we have a lot of bad human tendencies that are becoming, once again, a little bit too mainstream and too socially acceptable because of the current political climate. And it's a dangerous, scary thing, which is all the more reason why literature remains an important part of us learning how to interact with one another, learning how to live, learning how to be better people in this modern age. All right, then. Next time, we will be looking at the story called 66, which was written in 2003 for this collection. And that will bring us down to just 5 stories left to go in the cast of Pajamas stories. So please tune in a couple of days. Maybe I'll do another one tomorrow. We'll see. To see what that is all about here on Let's Talk Ray Bradbury. Thank you, and get out there and be good to one another.